Miss Grace. Um,
Hello. Hi,
hey,
everyone. Can you hear me?
yeah. Um, how do I do the presentation again?
Um, you upload it to my files and just open
Presentation?
it. Yeah, presentation.
Okay. Oh, there it is.
Okay. Can everyone hear us? Please type in the on the chat box. Okay, great. So I have 4 minutes left. Hold on. I'll just check the Facebook Live. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Good morning to you, Chef Jesuit. Um, I'm Grace Paraza from the Bailiwick Academy. And tonight we're going to have Chef Jesuit Nugas as our presenter. He will talk about how to stand out in the competition. Okay. And Chef Jesuit is actually a bailiwicker himself. He enrolled in our other classes, but he's also going to be our instructor when he gets home here in the Philippines.
Yeah.
So he will share with us his techniques in decorating cakes. Chef is a certified sugar art and cake judge by International Cake Exploration magazine. Um, and he's a winner of American Cake Decorating Magazine Out of the Box Challenge. So I'm not sure if you've seen the American Cake Decorating Magazine. If you subscribe to that one, Chef Jesuit's cake was chosen. Uh, it was on the front page. Okay, and also he's a winner at the New York Cake Show, and a winner for cake competition in Oklahoma State Sugar Art Show. Okay, so Chef is an award winning. It's very award winning, and he's won a lot of awards in the U.S. Actually, Chef Jesuit is streaming live
Yeah.
from the U.S. from New York, right, Chef?
Pop up. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So um, so I'll just give the presentation to you, Chef, and I'll leave it on to you. Thank you so much, Chef, for joining us today.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you. So,
Okay.
hello, everyone. Good evening to all of you in the Philippines and to wherever you are in the world. Good morning. My name is Jesuit. I'm a bailiwicker. So I actually enrolled in 10 classes through Bailiwick Academy. So last year, Grace and I were kind of talking about doing an online class, but because of my schedule constraints, I wasn't able to do that. So I told Grace that I would be very happy to kind of share something to all of you at this time when everyone is on quarantine, and probably just share what I know on joining competitions and making your business stand out amongst everyone else. So, just a little bit of a background to what I do. I actually work as a nurse practitioner with a cardiology service, and I work in a cardiology practice. So I'm one of the frontliners, as they call it. And it's a very challenging time to all of us, especially to those who are not able to work and has very limited resources. So I really hope that the platform we have at Bailiwick Academy is very helpful in providing you some means to support your families. So I also am the owner of Sweet Project, which is a culinary studio in Tacloban City, and I sometimes go home almost uh, every year to do classes. I also do classes at Cara Marie, and here in the U.S., I am a certified cake judge by the International Cake Exploration Society, and I also have joined competition. So this platform today, I'll be discussing about how to stand out in a competition. So basically, a lot of us are probably chickened out, just like what I was in the past, to join competition. So before I joined Philippine Culinary Cup, which is every August in the Philippines, I joined twice and got the silver placement. And then in 2015, 2015, I joined a New York Cake Show after one of my friends, Joan Weineke encouraged me, so I did that. And she then also encouraged me to do the Oklahoma State Sugar Art Show, in which I also won some awards. But how do you really stand out in a competition? What's really your goal in joining competitions? So in the past, I really thought that joining competitions is more or less like um, just to kind of add feather to your cap, or sort of like a bragging rights. But I think that was a wrong mindset, in the sense that I wasn't really fully enjoying the process of joining competition. So in the past, um, I was a very competitive person, in the sense that um, I try to put so much pressure on myself and not enjoy the whole process of joining competitions. Like, what does it really feel like joining competition? What do you really have to get from it? Or from a baker's standpoint, what do you really aim? Um, and how would you put out your best product in the market? So, as a certified as a certified cake judge, there are several criteria that we usually follow in judging pieces. So first is neatness, which this is what I'm sharing to you are basically just like the standard judging criteria. So there is neatness, which is usually 10%. There is the originality and creativity, which is about 15%. Proportion and balance, 10%. Skill and precision of techniques is 20%. Number of techniques used is 15%. Difficulty of technique is 10. And overall appearance is 20%. So we'll break them down slowly and um, and discuss each of the criteria. So neatness, which is 10%. So um, this will boil down to how fine your work is in terms of like covering your cake with fondant. So if you notice, a lot of the times the judges would scrutinize, I mean, not a lot of times, but all the time, the judges will scrutinize your work and give you points to how well you executed the technique. And that is in terms of precision and neatness. So make sure that your cake or your make sure that your cake or the the whole piece itself is malinis, meaning it's very clean. Your fondant should have no bumps, no fingernail marks, no pin pricks, because the judges have a very keen eye that will see all those flaws in your cake. Now, how do you really prepare for a competition like those? So, what I would always suggest, or what I always would recommend to people, is just to practice, practice, and practice. So there's really nothing wrong with 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 there's nothing really, how do you say this? Don't be faint-hearted in joining competitions, and you just have to make sure that when you put in a piece that's the representation of what you do or of yourself. So um, what my friends would usually tell me is when you put out a piece, you should be that should speak for your work, that should be a representative of yourself. So that's why when you join competitions, you don't put in a cake that you would usually sell out every day, or that you would usually you don't put out a cake that's very ordinary, quote unquote, because you want the cake to you want this piece to be the best piece that you've ever created. So for neatness, also we look at, the end points, the seams, make sure that they don't have seams. And oftentimes you can actually you can actually hide those seams and those marks by putting an element. But make sure that that element, say for example, you have a seam, you can put in a strip and pipe in some decorations, and that will hide it. So in that way, it's not very obvious that you have that seam right there. But um, make sure also that when you pipe in elements or when you put in a decoration, that it would make sense to the whole design. So also for neatness, when you say, for example, pipe in flowers, make sure that they're not crackled like on the edges when you thin them out, because that will speak so much of the consistency and your technique in handling the gum paste. So next is originality and creativity, which is usually about 15%. So basically, for this section, we look at, how original the design is, you have uh, how you have recreated some basic techniques and applying like some modern twist to it. So, say for example, royal icing. So a lot of times, we use royal icing for pipe work or line work, but then some others have used it to texturize, their fondant. So that's a pretty modern application of royal icing. So using mediums that they're not usually used on. So, say for example, wafer paper. So, a lot of times, we use wafer paper for flowers, to create like 3D structures and all that stuff. But a lot of people would crumble. Some people would crumble wafer paper and apply it to texturize their fondant. So those are pretty, modern approaches to using traditional mediums into like a modern way to apply them. So also for originality, for this part, I always would advise people to come up with a good inspiration. So I will show you in my next slides about the different cake pieces that I've entered in competitions and what my inspiration was. So originality in the sense that you don't exactly copy the design from a previous cake, because a lot of times cake competitions will not allow an exact replica, or will not allow previous cake pieces entered into their competition, because then you will score really low on originality. So also this applies to your baking business. So say for example, everyone is selling Sanserval, right? So how do you make yourself really stand out from everyone who's selling Sanserval? So I know a friend who would fill her Sanserval with like ice cream and sell it frozen, almost like a frozen Sylvanas, but a bigger version. So it's like a Sanserval ice cream cake and all that stuff. So it's really up to you on how you can maximize your resources and try to kind of um, kind of create some innovations based on what you have. So creativity, it's talking about how you used other mediums in such a way that It's a very fresh sight to the judges. It's a cool idea and something that we never have thought about. So next is proportion and balance. So this this criteria actually is very basic, meaning, is your cake well proportioned? Is your cake, are the colors well balanced? Um, is the sizing correct? So rule of thumb is at least you have to have 3 inches to 4 inches difference between from one tier to another. And also, when you create that cake, you must imagine like a triangle, If your cake doesn't look like the symmetry does not form like a triangle, then you might have to step back and think about it, because it might be um, it might be something that there might be something that you can add onto your piece, or maybe you have to adjust the sizing, because I know that some bakers would do like a 6 inch, 7 inches, 8 inch. If you step back, that would look like a straight structure. But then if you do 6, 9, and 12, then that would be a little bit different. So in terms of proportion and balance, make sure that the sizes are correct. Make sure that that when you use multiple shapes of cakes, that the edges of the next tier doesn't go out of the bottom tier. Meaning, some people would do a round cake and then put in a square cake on top, without understanding that the shape and the geometrical measurements of a square and round are different. So that one, and you must also put in a nice fitting board, meaning your board should be around your board should be around at least 4 to 6 inches bigger than your baseboard. I mean, than your base cake. So, do you guys have any questions? Any questions, anyone? So, all right. So we'll go for the skill and precision of techniques. So this will talk about how refined your skills are. So basically, when I joined competitions in the past, I would use techniques where I am strong at. So say, for example, I'm very strong at making sugar flowers and doing royal icing. So I stick to those techniques and try to kind of be very innovative about it, and and I'm also trying to put a new spin to it. So like pressure pipe details, filigrees, and all that stuff. So those are the things that I really like to do, and also sugar flowers. So in terms of skills and precision of techniques, um, again, you can only achieve perfection if you practice. So same thing with your baking products. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that once you've taken a class that you already got that skill. So meaning that any technical skill, for you to actually have it and for you to actually be good at it, you must be able to do them repeatedly. So it's just like any type of work. You work in a bank, you can't operate the machines just right away. There's a learning curve to that. So I always advise people that when they join competitions, that they try to practice a skill, make them many times, and then apply it on the cake. So also, in terms of skill and precision, the more difficult the technique, the higher the score is. So if, say, for example, you put in a technique on piping, and you put in a technique on sugar flowers. All right. So when you put in these two techniques in doing the cakes, make sure that they are actually nicely done, meaning that you try to pipe in really flawlessly, and made your sugar flours really uh, very well. So thin flour, thin petals, and almost botanically correct, and then you will get higher points. But if you are just very new to the technique, I would not really suggest to put it on your piece, or else that might you might lose some points. So in terms of skill and precision, do what you're comfortable with and try to elevate that skill into something that's fresh, something that's very new, and something that we haven't really thought about. So that will also talk about your creativity and your ability to maximize all these mediums available for you. Next is the number of techniques used. So number of techniques is the more mediums, the better. So like you have fondant, pastillage, royal icing. What else do we have? Fondant, pastillage, royal icing. You have gum paste. You have white chocolate. You have isomalt. It's endless. So the more techniques you use, the better. However, again, you must make sure that you must make sure that the techniques you have, or the techniques you put into the cake, has been mastered, because you will be scored depending on how you executed the technique. Next is the difficult of technique. So a lot of people would say, string works would usually win over sculpted cakes. That's not true all the time, because the difficulty of technique can come in various forms. Some people can do basic string works, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's more difficult than doing cake sculpture. So this doesn't. So the difficulty of technique means that is your technique something that would require a higher level of skill? Okay, so you can score 10 points on that. Then overall appearance is usually 20%, which we'll talk about the overall impact. So um, this will um, this will deal with, like, is there any wow factor to the cake, or are the colors really blending well, or does the cake fit the theme of the competition? So in the Philippines, there's a couple of competitions. One is the Philippine Culinary Cup, which is usually done in August, and then there is the Cake Fiesta Manila, which is done in November. So Philippine Culinary Cup has uses the standards of like the pastry competitions across the world, and Cake Fiesta Manila would use Cake Fiesta Manila would use the standards that's used in Cake International and some other cake competitions here in the U.S. So let me talk about the pieces that I did for um, cake pieces that I did for some of the cake competitions. So in 2011, this was my very first Philippine Culinary Cup. So what I did was I used a cake. So the bottom part of the cake is actually edible, and I used Mendi tattoo as my inspiration. So basically, this cake is very Indian, right? So you got Mendi, you got the lotus flower, and the butterfly. So when I think about cake competition, uh, I always look at for a very good inspiration. So I don't really look at cakes that have won in the past. I don't really copy them. I don't use any of those. When I think about inspiration, I think about architecture. I think about landscapes. I think about vases. I think about, embroidery patterns. I think about, you know, anything outside cake. So basically, this one is a Mendi inspired cake. So Mendi is actually used in Indian weddings. So they are tattooed in the bride's hands for their wedding. So it has a lot of symbolism to weddings essentially. So I those what you see on the cake itself are hand piped. So I used tip number 1 or 2, I think. And then I got filigree and string work and lotus flower and a butterfly. So all of those has significance. So when you make a competition cake, make sure that they are at all related, or meaning that each of the element has significance. So you can't really put in a mendi and then put ribbons and bows, because you should be able to explain rel- uh, the relationship between why did you have this pattern versus the other one. So that can be placed on your on the explanation of why those elements are present on your cake. So this cake, I won silver medal. So the comment of the judges is that it should have been cleaner, which I agree. It was not a very clean cake. This was actually my very first competition, so it should have been a very clean cake. The bottom part of the styrofoam that's floating, because the bottom tier is actually a real cake. The second and third tier are all styrofoam dummies. So make sure that when you join competitions and the bottom piece is actually exposed, make sure to cover them with fondant. Seeing um, they don't like seeing uncovered bases for that. And make sure that your string work is the distance from one string work to another should be the width of one string work. So it should be more finer work. And make sure also that when you use a sugar flour on top, that you don't stick the wire directly into the cake. So there must be a straw or a small PVC pipe that you have to use to stick your flour. So same thing with your bakery operations. Actually, wires are not really considered as food grade. So when you make cakes, or when you make cakes and use gum-based flours, make sure that you have to use bubble straw or a PVC pipe insert into the cake before you insert the wire. Okay. So next one is my Philippine Culinary Cup year two. So this is in 2012. So I went back to join Philippine Culinary Cup and have this piece, which is more or less like representing more like a tropical wedding. So you see the gum paste flowers done in orchids. And then I have two twig branches on the top tier. And then I have a painting of the dendrobium on the cake itself, and string work, which is roughly around 2 to 2.5 inches. So this cake actually, um, the inspiration of this cake was like I wanted to think of cakes or pieces that was not done yet in cake competitions. So I haven't done anyone submitted like an all orchid cake. So I did this. So I used 4 types of orchids. Thank you, Olivia. I used 4 types of orchids. So there's the Oncidium orchids, Cymbidium, moth orchid, and dendrobium. So this cake also won second. The very reason why I failed to get gold on this cake was it should have been cleaner. The technique is very basic. So string work, but then the string work was too basic. Straight lang siya. So from one end to another end, no pattern at all. It was very simple, but I won silver for this. So this was in Philippine Culinary Cup. So the string work pattern, I imagined, the flow of waters and the waterfall, etc. That one, and then this time I used um, glass boards, but then from afar it didn't really blend very well. I should have used just whiteboards. So that's the inspiration for my cake at the Philippine Culinary Cup. So in 2015, in 2012, that was my last competition in the Philippines, and then I moved to New York uh, to work as a nurse. So in 2015, one of my friends was encouraging me. Her name is Joan Weinike. She's also a Filipino who has joined competitions here in the U.S. and has also won in Oklahoma in the Oklahoma State Sugar Art Show. So she encouraged me to join the cake competition. Uh, there's a question here. Do you prepare the gum-based flowers on the competition day itself? No. Um, so Teresa's asking, do we prepare gum-based flowers for the on do we prepare gum-based flowers on the competition day itself? No. I usually prepare my flowers months in advance and keep them in dry in a container with silica gel. So especially in the Philippines, which is a very humid, which has a very high humidity level, I put silica gel. You have to put silica gel and store them. So I usually prepare them months before. So most of my cakes, if they are all dummies or styrofoam, I prepare them at least around 3 months before the competition. So this cake, so just type in your questions and then I'll be very happy to answer them. So this cake is inspired by an English garden. So if you notice, it's very English style. You got some English flowers right there, minus the peonies. I just put in the peonies because they look great. But this is an English style wedding cake, very dainty. I used a lot of sugar flowers on this one, which took me around 6 months to prepare. And I traveled this cake from upstate New York down to New York City for this competition. So this is a 4-tier cake. I traveled it all done. Um, I traveled this all done and with all the string works and sugar flowers. So um, I used more softer colors, so it's more appealing and more balanced. Because typically for wedding cakes, you kind of avoid strong colors, but sometimes strong colors work. But on the safe side, pastel colors would do better. How do you prevent fondant from being moist? In the Philippines, I use a lot of Tylose powder. If you go to www.wilton.com, get their fondant recipe and add about 2 teaspoons of Tylose powder, 2 teaspoons to 1 tablespoon, depending on the humidity. And then when I was working in the Philippines, I used to keep my cakes in the in an air conditioned room. If you don't have an air conditioned room, it should be fine, except that one of the things that you have to watch out for is if it rains, then because sugar is hygroscopic, so meaning it absorbs moisture, then your fondant will get really soft. So what you do is just leave it in an air conditioned room. Is there actual piping job done? Is there actual piping job being done like a finished product? No. So in cake competitions, if you go to Cake Fiesta or Philippine Culinary Cup, you don't have to pipe anything. You bring in a finished cake. So in that way, you can make your pieces in advance. It's actually unless you're competing for live competitions, then you have to do the cake on site. But if you're competing for display competitions, then you have the luxury of time to prepare your pieces. Is Stylos the same as Trehalose? I'm not sure about Trehalose, but it's the same as CMC. Tylos or CMC are pretty much the same. Okay. And then here is my cake at the Oklahoma Sugar Art Show. This is actually one of my favorites, if not my favorite piece. I only won second on this cake, but I love this cake so much. I actually took this cake actually took me about 3 months to finish. It looks very simple, but took as much time on my end. So this cake is actually inspired by a royal Albert tea set. So the cake competitions usually for wedding cakes, they usually require 3 tiers. Thank you. They usually require 3 tiers. So this cake is actually an East meets West kind of concept. So I used both Eastern and Western flowers. So you got peonies, you got roses, and then there are royal icing handles on the side that you could see from the bottom and top tier. And all those are actually made out of royal icing. And then you have the wafer layers. So if you see the cookie wafers, those are actually made from just very thin gum paste. So I use a pasta machine to roll out my gum paste, and then I hand cut them. So this one is inspired by a Royal Albert tea set. So the scrolls on the side represents the handle of the tea set, and then the oval decorations are actually elements of the tea set itself. So this is what I usually. That's how I conceptualize my cake. So I have a mood board. So I go to Pinterest. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, everyone. I have a mood board that I usually look at when I make my pizzas. So go to Pinterest, see something that would interest you, and then pick out the colors, pick out the flowers, pick out your main concept, and 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 um, and think about how you can incorporate the different elements into your cake. So this is an all ivory cake. It looks white, but it's not pure white. It's ivory. And I actually traveled this cake from Albany, New York, to Atlanta, Georgia, which is about 2 hours, and another 2.5 hours from Atlanta, Georgia to Oklahoma. I checked in this cake and it was fine. So also, I think there's a question about how do you, yes, Royal Albert pieces. How do I travel the whole cake? So basically, I put them in a box. I put them in a box, and usually you can use crates or make sure that you get a box that is actually almost just about 3 to 4 inches bigger than your cake. And then I usually put a hard board at the bottom, and then put a dowel in between, and then support it on top, just so they don't stumble. But sometimes, cake accidents happen. So I'll show you the next cake, which had a major accident. So this one I got second. How does a competition give you a theme to follow, or you decide on your own? Where do you get your inspiration? Your cakes are awesome. Thank you. Um, so for competitions, yes, they do give us a theme, but then there's a category in which it's a freestyle, free theme uh, division. So you can create your own piece, make your own, draw out an inspiration from anywhere. There's also a themed category in which you have to follow the theme requirements of the cake show. Hi, for royal icing, do you prefer liquid egg whites or meringue powder? By the way, your cakes are gorgeous. Thank you, Anna. So for my royal icing, I use raw egg whites, but then I strain them using stockings, just so you take out all the impurities and to also make sure that you really have a very smooth royal icing. So this cake won second. So my New Year cake show actually won Best of Show and Best of Wedding Cakes first place at the New Year cake show. It was in the semi-pro category. I actually just joined semi-pro. I was so chickened out to join professional division because I don't think my skill level is there yet. But then with the New York cake show results, it was very reassuring that I could go to the professional level. But then when I joined Oklahoma State Sugar Art Show, which is a different ball game, it's this cake show. I went back to semi-pro because I wanted to kind of feel how I will do with semi-pro division, and then eventually to professional masters. And then here's my cake. So going back, this cake from Oklahoma State Sugar Art Show, I won second. So key points on this cake is that my the glazing of my leaves were not very even. So sometimes gum paste absorbs moisture differently. So I don't know what happened, why my glazing was not even. So I think the takeaway point with that is just glaze them a day before your competition to make sure that they have the same sheen. And also with the oval pieces, those are actually molded. They're not piped. So they told me that with the degree of skill I have for piping, I should have just piped the roses and I would have scored better. And also for the pipelines, they were actually not that clean. I had some smudges of gold. So also lesson learned, when you use gold pieces for your cake, make sure just to color your royal icing or gum paste close to the color of gold. So if you miss painting on them, at least it's very discreet and would not be easily noticed because the gold and yellow can camouflage gold. Same thing with same thing with you making your everyday cake. So if you're making a wedding cake and you put gold swags, don't put white. Don't use white color. Or if your intention is to spray your cake with gold, don't use white fondant. Use a golden yellow, so it's almost close to the tone of gold. And then this is my piece. It's oh, okay. This is my piece at the Oklahoma State Sugar Art Show in 2018. I won Best of Division, Best in Wedding Cake, first place in Wedding Cakes, and Best of Show at the Semi Pro Division. So for this cake, my inspiration was Snow White. Okay, Snow White. So thank you. So the inspiration of this cake was Snow White. So I used the 1959 adaptation of Snow White. So if you see the garland on the sides, that is actually inspired from the ballet from the ballet performance for Snow White. And if you see the couple, like those are hand piped. Those are hand pipe couples. That's actually one of the scenes in Snow White. And then I use blue tones for the color because that was the color of the dress of Snow White in the 1959 film. The theme here was modern classic, and I think that Disney films are modern classic. They are very classic and have modern live action adaptations to it. So that's why I made this cake. So when I did this cake actually was a disaster. When I went to Oklahoma, I had an assumption that they will take care of my cake from the airline company that I used. So I checked in the cake. When I arrived in Oklahoma, the cake was upside down, had a lot of dents, broken pieces, etc. So I have to redo some of the pieces at the hotel on a Wednesday before I submitted the cake on a Saturday. So when you make competition cakes, so make sure that the lines are clean. My friend Joanne Weineke actually helped me clean out some of the lines because she saw some seams there. So usually if may dugtong, so if there's a break in the line, what we do is you put like if you put a strand of fondant as your border and you don't want anyone to see the seam, you can use actually slightly wet fondant and apply it to that seam and then brush it until you can't see the seam anymore. So that can apply actually to anything. So um, for this cake, I won almost around $7,000 for prizes. It was very rewarding, but it took a lot of time on my part, um, and I was so nervous in transporting this cake. So next is my recent win at the American Cake Decorating Magazine. So this was the out of the box challenge. So if you are one of the subscribers of the American Cake Decorating Magazine, this cake was the cover photo for the July-August issue. So there was about 100 plus contestants who submitted their portfolio, and then they trimmed it down to 10. And then from the 10 finalists, we were given a wedding cake brief. So we were asked to make a cake out of the specifications of the couple. And we were also given a box of items from the sponsors that we were told to use. Oh, hi, Ate Jo. She's around. So Jo and Waiki is actually one of my friends in here. She was one of the um, people who encouraged me joining competitions here in the U.S. So this cake for the American Cake Decorating Magazine, um, I actually won the cover photo and won prizes from it. So the story of this cake is, there's a couple from England who wants to get married in a courtyard, and they wanted something gold, they wanted something whimsical on their cake, but they wanted it very classy. So they also wanted to pay homage to Jasper Ware collection. So if you type Jasper Ware, that will give you a lot of nice inspiration for your cakes, for your wedding cakes. So that oval piece that you see on the middle tier of that cake is inspired from a Jasper Ware collection, and the textured tiers you see in the whole piece is actually made out of wafer paper. So I mean icing sugar paper. So I put in the icing sugar paper in the icing sheet in the coffee grinder, and then applied it to the cake. So, and also you got the filigree. So this whole piece, you have the gold berries, which makes it a little bit whimsical. And the branches are also in gold, and um, the design itself is actually inspired from a jar, basically. So I think that's it. So take points for takeaway points for this webinar is number one, do not be afraid to join competitions. So when you join competitions, do not just aim for the prize, because really when you join competitions, you're there to learn. People will you're there to learn, so people will actually you people will be very helpful in cake shows and providing you critics feedback on your cake, which will also then help you improve your craft. So if you notice, my cakes have transitioned from a not so good to something acceptable to my standards, um, because that's the takeaway I get from joining competitions. So do not be afraid to join competitions. It will also build your it will also build your resume as a cake decorator, as a baker, and also a few things that I learned from competition is you go in not for the prize, but for the value of joining competitions. So a lot of the people will be upset with comments from the judges. Why did I only get second? My cake is better than theirs. You're only thinking about what you think, but there's other people who's judging your cake and who has experience that can provide you very valuable lessons. So yun. And then second is when you join competitions, be ready for anything. So, there can be cake accidents, things cannot go as planned sometimes. But then if you come in with always have a plan B for that. And if you have a plan B, I'm pretty sure you will get it through. So Another thing is ano pa ba for even for baking. Sometimes for baking, I think the competition is more stiffer than wedding cakes actually. So what I usually tell and advise my students is, when you bake or when you sell something, it's hard to sell like it's hard to sell when you have so much items. So if you notice in the market, if you notice in the market, there are people who would make, one product and get it known, you know. If you're like a big shop chain, you can have multiple products, that's fine. But I always tell my students, if you want to have a mark in the baking industry, make one product that you will be known for. Because what would happen is, you have so many products, you tend to not your focus and attention is divided into the many products you have. So it's hard really to kind of keep up from the demands of how you can innovate and upgrade your product, versus if you have one product that you're really good at, you can focus your energy and attention to it and be good at it. So that's my advice. So if you notice, they're like Gunanan is known for their ensaymada. They just do ensaymada, but I'm sure they can do cakes too, but they focus on ensaymada. Or some people are known for their frozen brazo, or some people are known for their sanserval. So those things are actually, you can actually learn from their standpoint as very successful bakers. Although I'm not saying that uh, you have to limit your products in just one or two, and you can still have other products in your repertoire, but at least have something that you're really good at, because that will set you up to more success. And also for joining competitions, don't be afraid to join competitions. Sometimes it takes courage and confidence to put on a cake on the table. But if you want to improve and if you want to be good at what you're doing, you really have to push yourself. That's it. Miss Grace, any questions so far?
Yes, Chef. Thank you so much for joining us today. Do you have any more questions, guys? Please type it in the chat box.
So
Yeah.
I actually told Grace that I will be doing a demo for like a sugar roast, but then there's a limitation in my equipment. So I'm using my laptop now. So I will do it on a
Mhm.
separate occasion. So, or on a separate schedule.
Yeah, so we're going to schedule that at a later date. Okay. We have a question from Joy. When will be your next masterclass here in the Philippines?
So actually, that's still a big question because there's this COVID thing going on. So I'm not
Mhm.
even sure if I can go home on July. That was actually the plan, was for me to go home in July, shoot a class for Bailiwick, and do some classes. But then because of that, I'm not sure yet, but I will keep you posted.
Yeah, hopefully you can we can shoot a video for us
Yeah.
by the time you get here. All right. Um,
So,
is there anyone else here? We have Amir here on Facebook.
oh,
Hold on. Yeah. He says that he's loving it and this serves as a validation of the things running in my mind. Thank you, Chef.
yeah.
Yeah. That's his comment in Facebook.
Oh, very good. So I actually know Amir. He has joined competitions, and he also. I told him, some things about his
Mm-hmm.
pieces, and he's been very gracious about it. So I'm actually looking forward to see more of his pieces in the competition.
Mm-hmm. Right. Especially now that there's an upcoming Cake Fiesta Manila on November,
Yeah.
right? So it would be a great opportunity for us to for them to join the contest.
That's
So
true.
I know that there are a lot of we have a lot of students from Bailiwick um, who are already crushing it.
Um,
So just what Chef Jesuit said, don't be afraid to join. So because you'll never know until you
yeah,
try. Diba?
yeah.
Yeah.
Competition builds your character. So it's
Mm-hmm.
a character building experience. It's a very humbling experience. And, I think to some point you must be out of your comfort zone to
Mm-hmm.
realize what's there for you. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
question here. I'm in Canada, so I notice it's hard for my gum paste medium. So I noticed so hard to adjust my gum paste medium for flowers. It dries out so fast, even with my flexi paste becomes hard as a rock, even for just half day. Winnipeg is the third coldest city every winter, and I don't know what to put my gum. Okay, so Cheryl, you can send me a private message, and then I can look at your recipe and adjust. So my suspicion is, like I have adjusted my gum paste recipe to the climate here in New York, so I don't use a lot of tylose because tylose actually makes it hard quicker, and
Mm-hmm.
because the climate in Winnipeg is dry, which is similar to New York, I would use lesser tylose. But you can send me a message so I can review your recipe and make recommendations. So, okay, you're welcome.
Okay.
Uh,
Thank you so much. Do you want to? Do you have any advice for our students with regards to the cake decorating classes that we have?
Yeah, so there is actually a bunch of cake decorating classes available through Bailiwick Academy. So one is the class of Mark Kevin Reyes. I've seen his class on sugar flowers. You can start off from that and build up your skill. If you also want piping skills, there's a class of Jing Fernandez on buttercream flowers. I actually enjoyed that class and I can't wait to try making the flowers myself. And then there's also a class of Mayan Orido, who's actually one of my good friends. She will teach you how to create a clean canvas first and make 3D structures. So in this way you can understand what it takes to create a very stable cake in terms of structure and design. Mayan is also one of the cake artists that I look up to. She would teach you how to ganache cakes and prepare your cakes in such a way that it's going to be very stable no matter how crazy the design is. So also there are a couple of of other classes that you can take through Bailiwick Academy. I would suggest that you go basic and then move along as your skill advances. So I for sure, even if I went to the French pastry school, and I have taken classes, but I still, it's always nice to look back and see how people do it, because they might be doing it differently, and you still can take a tip or two in improving your skills. So I actually honestly enrolled in the classes of Joey Prats. I enrolled in the class of Chef Jimbo. I enrolled in the class of Alan Mertola. I enrolled in the class of Jing Fernandez. You know, those classes are really value for money. They give you more than what you need. So
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest, try to explore their classes, be inspired from what they do, and make profit from what you have invested.
Right. Okay. But if you're a beginner in cake decorating,
Mhm.
which one would you choose? Buttercream or fondant?
If I'm a beginner in cake decor, it actually depends on it actually depends on what you feel like doing. Some people like piping. So some people likes just fondant, or they like clay modeling. So I would say you go for
Mhm.
fondant. Fondant is actually easier than what people think about. And I always think that buttercreams are a little bit harder to master because it requires really it's a piping skill. So there's like pressure, pressure, angle, position, bag position. So they are two different arenas, but I would say, I think fondant would be a good start. I think you guys have a
Mhm.
fondant class in the basic, right?
Yes, yes, we
Oh,
do.
great.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yes,
you
sharp
guys can,
edge fondant.
yes. So you guys can take that class. There is actually a trend on sharp edge technique cakes right now. And if you
Mhm.
notice, most of my cakes are now sharp edged because it's more cleaner. And although it looks very complicated from the outside, but learning the process is actually just a very simple technique.
Mhm. Okay. Do you have any final advice for our students?
So, my final advice to our students is continue learning. I think that the beauty of Bailiwick Academy is they provide you a very accessible platform to enjoy and love learning. I think that no matter how big you are in the industry, or how no matter if you're starting in the industry, any valuable information is very helpful. And always dream big, because dreams are actually a blueprint of your success. So if you don't dream big, then then you might not be able to get where you are, because you have to make sure that you have a blueprint. Just like going somewhere, you have to have a roadmap
Mhm.
to go from point A to point B. You can't just live um, each day and not have a plan in the future. So I would say, learn as much as you can, and have a roadmap for yourself, and get that goal, because it will just set you up to more success. Having a blueprint will just set you up to success. And
Right.
enjoy
And
the through Bailiwick.
yes. And I think whatever decision that you make today will actually dictate your future.
That is very
So you have to make that step now
Yeah,
because there's no better time than now, right?
that is correct.
So thank you so much, Chef, for joining us today. And
Thank
I think
you.
there's no more question here. And thank you everyone for your time. As usual, this will be recorded, and so I will send you a link to this video, to this webinar. All right.
Thank you, and
So
thank you, Grace, for inviting me, and thank you, everyone, for joining me. And I hope to see you all sometime. And I'm very excited about my project with Bailiwick Academy. So stay tuned for it.
yes, and we have to schedule your next webinar.
Yeah,
Okay. Next time you're gonna do a demo, right?
yeah.
For
So I actually
sugar
hold on.
flower.
I'm actually just gonna. I'm in the bedroom right now because my niece is actually outside, but I can show you what I was actually planning to do. So
Mhm.
I'm sorry. So I actually have. I actually plan to do this as a webinar.
Wow, that's nice.
This is actually a gum paste rose that I did.
Mhm. Right. So next time
So,
they're gonna learn that on how to make it.
yes.
All right. That's great. I'm so excited for that webinar. So we'll just have it scheduled and update you guys when will it be available. All right.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.